Good morning, everybody. I think we're ready to get started. So good to see everybody in person. I love it. Welcome, welcome, and welcome to everybody online that's attending virtually. We're glad you're here too. And yes, I'm Jennifer Clem from Central Michigan University, and I was the chair last year. I was not supposed to be chair this year, and I'm not, but I'm going to fill in. Unfortunately, Susan English, who was supposed to be chair this year, had some family emergencies that she needed to take care of, and so she has retired from Aquinas College and therefore couldn't serve as chair. So this was supposed to be the year for an independent to serve as chair. But I did send a notice to Dartep over the summer. But Marcia Fetters, who was chair-elect, has graciously agreed to go ahead and serve as chair. And so, thank you, Marcia. But I didn't want to leave poor Marcia all by herself to organize the first meeting. So that would help out and get October, the first meeting going, and we will officially welcome Marcia as chair, and then we will need to elect a chair-elect from an independent. So if anybody's thinking about it, we're going to be asking for nominations soon. But we also want to welcome all of our new members. If it's the first time you've been in Dartep, we probably can't introduce you all individually, but we want to welcome you here. For those that are online that are new, we also encourage you in breakout sessions to introduce yourself to the other members, and we're glad you're here. And where are we at? So we're so happy to be at University of Michigan Flint and that they have agreed to host. And so I would like to introduce Beth Kvitsky, School of Education and Human Services.
Welcome, welcome. I know some of you are probably still in shock that I'm not in green, but I'm very excited to be here. I've been here for a year. And before I go on, I'd like to just do a land acknowledgement because it's very important to us here. We would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on today is the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary homeland of many indigenous nations. Most recently, the Nishnabek, including Potawatomi, Chippewa, Ojibwe, and Ottawa tribal nations. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide, forced relocation, and removal of many from this territory, and we honor and respect the many indigenous people, including those of the Three Fires Alliance, who are still connected to this land on which we gather. And I think our gathering is very important because having us face to face again is just invigorating. And I know that chatting before the meeting, you probably got some work done that's going to take you forward, or at least re-energized your soul. Thank you so much for coming, and I'll be around most of the day. If there are any questions or there's something you need, I'm happy to help you, and I'll get out of the way for Marcia and Jennifer to take us on the road to learning from MDE, etc.
I didn't think one of my first things of working with this group was going to be to call for a moment of silence from one of our colleagues. But on August 4th, we lost Dr. Ming Lee, who was Dean of the College of Education at Western Michigan University for the last 9 years. I worked for him and with him for 8 years as his associate dean. 1 year as a faculty member as he was making decisions and rearranging the college and things like that. But he fought a valiant battle with pancreatic cancer. And he lasted about 2 years after his diagnosis. And so at this time, we'd like to take just a moment of silence. He helped Western reorganize. He came in with a sports management background and learned about education. And he was an active member in the education community. I'd like to take a moment to honor him. Thank you all very much.
Okay, so here is your leadership team. Marcia Fetters from Western Michigan University is going to become chair. I'm currently your past chair, so we'll be electing our chair-elect. Beth Fighton from Oakland University serves as our treasurer. Thank you, Beth. She's done that for probably 4 years now, at least. If you have a question about dues or, and you are able to pay your dues here right now. So if you have a card, and then Brian, I'm not gonna say it, Philippiak, who is amazing, does all the technology, sets us up virtually, sets us up here, is always willing to do anything. So we definitely appreciate Brian. That's all. Dartep business. So we normally do approval of minutes for April, but I need to tell you that we do not have the minutes from April. Those were not completed. So in lieu of official minutes, we can decide as a group, we do have a video of the entire meeting that can be posted. We do have the minutes from the job alikes. We just don't have the general session minutes. So we can either watch the video and try to do minutes, which I don't really know if we want to do that. Or we can accept the video and the Dartep report and the job alike minutes as minutes, if everyone's okay with that. Okay, can we get an approval of? So Beth moves. Do I have a second? Lisa, second. All in favor, say aye. Those virtually, if anybody's opposed, please indicate in the chat. You can see that. And motion passes. Oh, wait. Did I get everything there? Okay. Well, we're going to get to the budget report. Yeah, slide. Next slide. Just a reminder of the dates, October 7th, we're obviously here. December 2nd, Oakland University will be hosting. Thank you, Oakland University. February 3rd, we have decided to do virtual because that's winter. It never works out well anyway. And then April 14th will be our Hope College Conference. Hopefully everything goes well and smoothly and we have that in person. Because we do the accreditation conference before the Dartep meeting. And we do have treasurer's report. Beth.
Good morning, everybody. Glad to see so many nice faces here today and all of you online. Hello. Our dues for this year are remaining the same as they have the last few years. The dues are remaining at $50 a person. You can pay me here today. We do have a virtual terminal set up on my computer. You are welcome to mail a check to Oakland University, care of me. My address is in the Dartep information that gets sent out to you. Or you can call me on the phone while I'm at work. If you can catch me at my desk, some of you, we did 3 or 4 rounds of phone tag, but we have been able to hook up and get those payments made. I think we have 9 universities right now that have already paid. Just as a reminder, when you're filling out your membership information, the members that you register for Dartep is not necessarily the same as the Dartep listserv. So the Dartep listserv you stay on forever unless you ask to be removed. So just so you are aware of that. Next slide, please. Our total in our account at the end of September was $14,409.32. That does not include the institutions that have started to pay. Some of those have come in over just the last 3 or 4 days. The money that we have in our Dartep account is used to pay for things like our technology. It pays for the food and refreshments and space, sometimes at our locations when we meet in person. If you have any other questions, you're welcome to contact me. Thank you.
Okay, we have organization reports. I believe MACD. Beth, are you reporting out for MACD?
I am.
Okay.
Not like Snapchatting. I'm looking at my notes, but I forgot my computer. So.
Hello, everybody. So MACD is actually, we're trying to make, so some of you who are new might not know what MACD is. So MACD is the Michigan Association for Colleges of Teacher Education, which is our state pro area for the AACTE, which is the American Association of Colleges of Teacher Education. MACD, you do not have to be a member of AACTE to be a member of MACD, and we will be resuming our due structure this year. The last couple of years, we haven't charged dues because we're planning to have more meetings going forward. So in the past, what MACD has done is we're the kind of the doers of the organizations, and not that others aren't doers, but our goal is to actually, we helped work towards getting through to the professional readiness exam. Did people have acid reflux just now when I even said it? And we also work towards keeping bad legislation from going forward and supporting good legislation. The other thing that MACD does is we'll have a fall meeting that we're still setting up, a winter meeting, and then there is a retreat in June up at Northern Michigan University. That is where a lot of that work gets done. So we were going to be sending out through the Dartep listserv a request for people who are interested in being added to the mailing list, just kind of a refresher. If you're wondering, am I part of it? Submit and we can make sure, so we can get those kinds of communications out. And even if you're thinking, I don't know for a member of MACD, but I'd be interested in just keeping up with what they're doing, please feel free to sign up for the listserv. And so thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you sign up on the listserv.
And Michigan Public Deans, Marcia.
Michigan Public Deans meets 4 times a year. We had our first meeting earlier in September. We've got the next meeting coming up in October. This year, we've also decided to form some subgroups that will talk between meetings and like that. We've got to focus on keeping up on the legislative changes and things like that. We're all concerned about what may happen during the lame duck session after the election and keeping up on that. We partner with MASU and we partner with Michigan Department of Ed. We have 4 meetings a year. We usually have a retreat. We have not had it for the last few years because of the pandemic. And we're looking at starting that again. And I'm the president of this year. Beth is president-elect for next year. And so we'll just keep kind of trading roles back and forth here for a couple of years. But we're looking forward to working with all the public institutions and also partnering with the independent institutions this year. One of our goals is to have one meeting together with the independents also to start building that communication at the dean's level also. MACD and this group make a good connection. We want to also make it at those independent meetings.
Lori for Michigan Independent.
Hello, my name is Lori Burgess, and I represent the Michigan Independent Educator Preparation Institutions. We have not had formal meetings just as a group other than meeting with MICU, Michigan Independent Colleges and Universities, to talk about the legislation. We had an August 1 meeting where we were able to ask some questions. And then the group met again September 30 for a webinar and an informational session. Susan English was a co-chair with me for the past 3 years. And now since she's retired, I'm the chair and very interested in having a co-chair. So if you would like to join me, I would love to share that responsibility. Thanks.
Think I skipped over the elections. We went really fast too. So we do need nominations for a chair-elect from an independent institution. The chair-elect, so you work as a team, a Dartep leadership team with Brian, Sean, your chair and your chair-elect. The chair leads that. We work together to schedule the meetings, plan the meetings, the Dartep meetings, and bring forth things to the agenda that the institutions would like to have presented, or information that's needed. The chair-elect participates in the planning and then is primarily responsible for minute taking, making sure the minutes get taken for the meetings and getting those. So I go to Brian and Brian gets them posted on the website. So that's the primary responsibility of the chair-elect. It is pretty low. The chair takes a lot of the lead. So it's a good time to learn about everything, and the team is great. I mean, you work with the team, works really well. So do we have any nominations from an independent for chair-elect Dartep?
You can ask people online to put it in the chat.
Anyone online that is interested or has nominations, please put that in the chat. You want to say something?
Yeah.
Beth wants to say something.
Put a plug in.
Sally Ray attacked me when I first started coming here about 9 years ago and coerced me into that chair-elect position. And it really was one of the best things I did professionally, because it made me connect and help me learn who was around, what the lay of the land was like. And so maybe if people want to think about it and then after lunch, they can give their name. I'd really encourage you, or contact someone back at your institution that might not be here, but you know that'd be really good. Because you do get to know a lot of people. And I'm not just even saying that to be polite. I really believe that this, one of the reasons I was able to move in the directions I've moved is because of my decision to be the chair-elect and the chair here years ago.
You agree, Sally?
Yeah, we all agree. It is. It was a very good learning experience. Definitely expanded. Me getting to know more people at other institutions. So definitely valuable. So. Maybe take your chat. Okay, so we will revisit after lunch. Think about that, and then if not, we will find you later. No, I'm kidding.
Twisting arms between meetings.
Okay, I know we kind of put a break here, Sean, but we're a little early. Do you want me to still stop and take a break, or does MD want to do a little bit and then we'll do a break, or?
I come right up and get started, and we can break in the middle of it. I would defer to the opinions of the collective, whether they want 10 minutes right now or not.
Keep going. They want to keep going.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce, we're going to move to MDE. We'll move the break down a little bit. MD will stop in the middle of theirs. And we'll do a 10-minute break later. So Sean Kopke, MDE updates. I think we have quite a few.
Yeah. Okay, good morning. Turns out, will this work? All right, thank you. For those of you who don't know me already, I'm Sean Kopke, manager of the Educator Preparation Unit at Office of Educator Excellence at MDE. For those who do know me, I am also, and those who don't, I am now the Interim Assistant Director of the Office of Educator Excellence. Our Leah Breen moved on earlier, thank you. Thank you. And we've got our team here, including the interim director of the Office of Educator Excellence, Sarah Levan, right there. Next to her is Bridget McDowell, our MTTC Education Assessment Specialist. All your MTTC questions should come to her, so there we go. Krista Reed, manager of our Professional Educator Certification Services Unit. We're joined also by Dana Billings from the Office of Special Education. She'll be in the CERT officers today. And I saw Jason Kalmbach in the back. Yes, Jason Kalmbach in our Data and Accountability Unit. And Holly Carruthers, our contractor working on our Explore programs, Future Cloud Michigan Educator, and various and sundry things that cost millions of dollars. So there we go. All right, let's go in. So that's our staff updates. We are going to be in a kind of an aggressive hiring mode, and I do send out through the Dartep listserv job postings as they come up. That's not that we want to poach you, but you know, I was poached from the Dartep membership. So it's a good opportunity. And we encourage you to share those out as they come up. Please follow us on social media. Look at those tags at Michigan Educator. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. I think mostly on Facebook and Twitter, but anyway, there it is. And use our hashtags, #ProudMIEducator or PME for anything that you share that shows the impact that you're having on and your graduates are having on the education ecosystem. We are only stronger together as a group, and we want to honor the work you're doing and the work your graduates are doing and the work that your teacher candidates are doing to support all of the children in our state. Educationally Speaking is our monthly newsletter. It comes out about the end of the month. It goes to all certified teachers. You can sign up for it on our website. In your Dartep written updates, there's a link to it, to the page where you can sign up for all of the email alerts from the Michigan Department of Education, including Educationally Speaking. And speaking of those Dartep written updates, this went out on Tuesday. Again, we issue it quarterly. It's archived on the Dartep website. Always valuable. At the very back end of it is a little directory of individuals from our office, like who should you ask different questions to, and or what's the core email box to send things to. So encourage you to do that. What we'll talk about today is just a sliver of what is in that document, some of which is unpacked in more detail there, and some we'll just have a quick reminders. So normally this is a spot for legislative updates. We usually have that right here. There's one big, hairy, ambitious legislative update for you that you're all eager to know about. And that is all the grant money allocated in the budget for growing new teachers. And so we have Holly's going to come up and speak to you about couple of our initiatives, the Explore for sure, and the Grow Your Own. I will also come in right at the end of that, and we'll talk about some more things, and then that we'll have more conversations in, I think, in Java Likes about this, and of course, ad infinitum until the money runs out. So come on up, Holly, take it away. And you've got the little
All right,
thing there.
make sure I can work this thing.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. So I have the great pleasure of being able to give money to people who need it. And so sometimes I joke when I'm on Zoom meetings, I feel like Oprah. I'm like, you get a scholarship and you get a stipend. So, but obviously all of those things come with parameters. So I'm going to walk through some of those today. Before we get deep into the legislation, save the good stuff for the end, right? That's how I make you stay. I do want to walk you through something we were able to accomplish with some federal Title II funds in the interest of recruiting future educators from the 6th through 12th grade level. So we distributed a grant, you may remember, it was like right in the middle of COVID, but we were able to get quite a few schools that were interested in building future teacher programs inside of their 6th through 12th grade buildings. And I have results from that effort that I thought would be really pertinent to you as you think about the educators that'll be coming your way. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the results of that grant, and then I'll talk you through the new grants that we have coming. That's what I just said. All right, so you may know that there are 4 arms to the Future Proud Michigan Educator work, but I'd like to display it visually so that you can see the relationship between them. We have educators who work in P-12 schools. Those are the grants that are coming out right now. That's kind of the big arm of those. We have those who want to change careers, those that were certified in other states. And then we have this 6th through 12th grade effort, which primarily was a CTE effort up until a couple of years ago. And then we created Explore, which was a more flexible opportunity for folks to think about future educators inside of their buildings with less of a commitment and a little bit less regulation than CTE typically has.
So what we did with Explore, our theory, was that if we could offset the development costs of a course, if we could maximize the student interest, and if we could adjust the models of staffing and instruction, we would remove enough barriers to increase access to participation in K-12 programs, which we hope would increase enrollment and in particular diversity in our EPPs. And then we'll have a larger and more diverse educator workforce. So these green bubbles kind of tell you a real quick summary of what we were really trying to do with this effort and what we were hoping that would come out of that. So in 2021, this is what we created. We created 3 flexible models of implementation. We created a full curriculum, competencies, and student learning goals. We created interactive student learning modules, a professional learning course to train the teachers, and we adjusted the pupil accounting manual to remove the barriers that were there before when educators tried to create these courses on the ground level. We created staffing guidance to really guide districts on who's the right person to be at the front of the room in this course. And then we also created a whole website housing all of that information. And we gave out these planning grants for $10,000 per building for anybody who wanted to make this effort happen in context with what they were already doing or what they wanted to do. Here's some of what they did. Several people created virtual or hybrid instruction paired with local teacher mentors. Remember that during COVID, everybody was really thirsty for something that could go hybrid or go remote quickly. And so we met that need. A lot of folks wanted to create inclusive and equity focused programs that were specifically targeted at a more diverse future educator workforce. And so a good example is in Lansing, we have a very wonderful dynamic teacher, Robin Murray, who specifically reached out within the community and brought students of color into a classroom and started talking to them about becoming teachers. A lot of folks wanted to create grow your own programs, especially in our rural areas. They really wanted to fill their own needs with their community members. We also had a really amazing effort between Central Michigan University and the Indigenous communities nearby in order to build something that would create future Indigenous teachers. We created, or several schools created programs that would attract diverse students into STEM fields specifically. And then we had folks that wanted to create high school students opportunity to earn college credits. And one of the things that I want to say here as a caveat is that when we built a curriculum, we built something that we thought could partner really well with the existing teacher preparation standards, but also could be very easily modified to meet whatever your intro level courses are at your institution. So there is curricular room to negotiate those things, because when we did our survey of what everybody teaches in their first course, it was completely different at every institution. So we wanted there to be room for you to partner with your local districts and build that together. And then we created CTE feeder programs. So one thing that's very interesting is anybody who has an existing CTE course, sometimes they have a hard time getting a full course to run an FTE. And so what we did was started creating things at the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade level so that students could start to become more aware of whether or not they wanted to commit to that CTE program before the full commitment. Here are some of our results. We had 44 grantees across 140 buildings in 9 different regions of the state. And you'll see here that the rural and town regions were the most interested in this grant opportunity, which I thought was very interesting because in particular, we were really trying to lift barriers in the rural areas of our state. We had students across every grade level, according to the programs that were built in this first round of grants. In particular, I thought it was very interesting to look at how many 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, almost 50% of the students were middle school students. 62% of the students that participated in Future Proud Michigan Educator Explore efforts during this first grant were economically disadvantaged, and 67% of them were female, which, as we know, we expected the majority of the students to be female. But if you compare these numbers to practicing teachers and current EPP enrollment, you can see that we have some interested male educators that would like to come through the system and will need a particular set of supports. Over 50% of our students were non-white that participated in this programming. And that does not include the Indigenous students because we didn't collect their UICs. So if we were to add in Indigenous students that were part of this programming, we would see a really interesting future set of diverse teachers. So this is my quick mention with Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe and Central Michigan University. These 230 students that they reached were not included in our data set. But in that moment where they joined together, they created this event that is going to lead into future teacher programming, where they brought together Indigenous guest speakers and storytellers to talk about their educational journeys and college and career opportunities in education professions. This is the part I think is most interesting. They did a survey and they found out of these 230 students, what their interest would be in education professions. You can see quite a few of them would like to be counselors. So the next arm of our effort, in addition to the Explore, is the folks who are working in P-12 schools. And this is the grant opportunity that we're going to move forward with. We were able to administer some funds from last year's budget, and we gave out about $1 million to current school employees that either wanted to earn initial certification or an additional endorsement. We're going to continue that effort now, but on a much larger scale. So as a summary, and for fiscal year 21, you saw the results from our Explore grant. In the last year, we ran the Explore Micro Grant, which was just sort of a patch between the two grants and these individual staffing grants. This year, as we move forward, we're running the Explore grant again for districts and schools that would like to create a new program or expand their existing program. Some of our districts want to expand to an out-of-school time model, for example. We will also run the Grow Your Own Staff grants for programs, which is the largest set of funding there in that dark blue color. And then in the middle, what we've decided to do with some of our other funding is offer Grow Your Own Staffing grants for alternative routes on a smaller scale, because those were excluded from the funding. So Section 27B of the state budget has funding for Grow Your Own programs. This is an important caveat inside of the legislation because it's not for individual teachers. And so we have to be really thoughtful about how we build a program and what qualifies as a program. The employees inside of the districts and ISDs can have these funds to use for tuition, books, testing fees, travel to and from coursework, and substitute costs. The recipients of 27B funding cannot receive 27A or 27C funding, which is the funding that's distributed by the Treasury for student teachers and EPP enrollees. The districts and ISDs who apply for these funds are going to need to demonstrate need for the funds, particularly with staffing data. They're going to need to project participant numbers, assure a no-cost pathway to teacher certification. They have to pledge to hire the participants of the program, and they have to get the participants to pledge to stay for as many years as they were in the program. This is all written directly into the legislation.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Can you go back one?
Sure.
Can you explain a little bit more what a no-cost pathway is?
No, you don't have to ask me. I'm not a legend, so I didn't write it. My understanding is that what you would build in a budget as a district is all of the fees and expenses that would be associated with teacher preparation covered in your budget. Is that fair to say? Okay. Would you like to? I don't understand.
Well, we're talking about the entire cost of college. And as well as the high school. We've been having these conversations, maybe some of the experience, but I don't think that there's enough money to sustain that. What kinds of numbers that we're talking about. It's not sustainable.
I understand. Yeah.
Especially if you get one kind of one.
Yeah. So the good news about this funding is that it was written in as a work project and can be extended until 2026. So there will be at least a set of folks that can get completely through programming in that time. Now, will it continue on and create a sustainable funding source? I don't know. So Sean and I have been working together on building an application for this grant. It isn't finished by any means, but this is what we suspect will go in it. And it's something that I wanted you to know so that you could support your district partners in thinking through the application, because they won't be able to apply without you. They need information from you in order to build their budgets, to understand coursework, the length of time that they need. So one of the first things that needs to go in a memorandum of understanding between you and the district, because that's a required part of the application, is how many semester credit hours and the rate for those hours through 2026. The scope of the coursework, how many courses will they need to take? How are they planned and mapped out over time? The responsibilities for selecting and mentoring the teacher candidates who go into this program, the commitment of the educator prep provider to evaluate any teacher candidate experience to expedite the pathway wherever possible, the responsibilities for coaching, observation, and assessment of the teacher candidates, the responsibilities for MTTC support, and then a commitment to support any teacher candidate that has unmet program needs after completion. This will be the foundation of the memorandum of understanding as we see it in order to apply. And you can see here that there are going to be particular pieces that our districts are going to struggle to put together without help from you. Go ahead.
Just looking at it, number one, there are our university, we don't know what the semester rate is going to be until. So how do we come up with that?
My advice would be to budget on what you do know, but I'm open to other folks' ways of thinking.
Well, I think universities had to sign a document recently and submit it to the Michigan Treasury saying that we would limit the increase in our tuition over the next so many years to 5% or less. So
You could build a budget around that.
You could also work with your financial group and say, look, we can guarantee that the students who come in will pay. Well, their stuff will be paid, they won't have unpaid accounts. So if you could freeze their tuition for the 4 years that's required to get through, we can guarantee that that money will be paid. And they may be willing to go for that because, you know, sometimes too much bush is more than a bird in the hand.
Go ahead.
We do the same thing with assuming when we do it for grants, to assuming tuition rates will go up and set an amount, 5%, 6%, or whatever it is, set that will be the tuition rate this year. The tricky part for us was number one and number 4 together, is that it's hard to say how many credit hours they're going to need because it depends on each person and how much we can count that they can bring in for the degree. So that's been a space where it's been tricky. And it's also been a space where it's been tricky to partner with people because while we can control the education courses and offer those on like a different schedule or however they want, when they have, this is particularly popular for parapros when they're using this with paraprofessionals, if they're missing general education credits that we need them to have, they have to take, when they're taking them at the university or the community college, they're at the mercy of how they're scheduled by other people, whether it will fit their schedule. And that's been one of the challenges in getting some of these things up and running, is getting the number of credit hours they're going to need in advance, along with expediting their pathway at the same time.
I totally understand. And one of the beauty, the opportunity and the challenge inside of the grant is that the educator, the organizations that want to apply for funding don't have to have specific educators identified in order to apply. They can want to build a program that can be sustained over time and filled by multiple roles across years. So you're absolutely right. There would need to be some level of collaboration among multiple institutions and different roles to build a budget that one thought would be reasonable for multiple people to go through a pathway, knowing that some will go through faster and with less credits than others. So here's what you can do for your next steps. Yesterday, we released a a memo that detailed the opening of the Explore grant. The Explore grant for programs for 6th through 12th graders is now open and will be open until November 10th. And that is one opportunity. The next opportunity is our plan to release in 2 weeks a press release that summarizes what you saw here that you could easily forward on to your partners or other folks in your networks. We are planning to do a grant webinar. Gina Garner and I are going to host a webinar on November 4th in order to help you and your partners both attend and hear the same information in one place. We will record the webinar for those of you who cannot attend, but will also be available for individual consultations as necessary. Working on estimating candidate costs will be very helpful. My experience with running grants for the last couple of years is that I have a lot of very ambitious building leaders and district leaders who would like to make this happen and who don't know who their counterpart is at the university level that can help them answer these questions. And so for you to direct that or expedite that in some way for them, I think would make it more likely for them to submit applications. You can start to build that memorandum of understanding well before the application is released. That will be probably the most time-consuming part of the process. So to have that in place starting now and then be ready come December, I think that would be probably the most advantageous way to take advantage of the opportunity for the grants. Our current expectation is that we will open the Grow Your Own program grants at some point in December and keep them open until probably early February. What, again, experience that I've had in running grants the past few years, some of the folks at the district level are like, please let this happen over a break so that I'm not in my building and I can spend time doing this. And other folks are like, please don't expect me to do this over a break because my breaks are important to me. So we're trying to accommodate both work styles and leave that application open throughout a winter break, but still have it open long enough after the return to take advantage of the timeline. Go ahead.
So it says that estimated candidate costs are from 10/1/22. But some of those students, some of those people might be they've already paid their tuition. So will it cover their fall tuition?
So the current answer for that is it depends on the funding source. And our plan is to take applications and then try to match the funding source as best as possible. There is one specific funding source that will backdate all the way until Sean helped me with the date on it again.
March 1st, 2021.
March 1st, 2021, yes. So the safest window of time is October 1st, because that's when the budget funds become available for this fiscal year through 26. But there is an opportunity to reimburse with specific funding sources. So if your program is already built, for example, and you already have folks going through it and you simply want to continue to grow and fund that program, those costs could potentially be included. If you're building a new program, one would assume that you don't have previous costs. Here's contact information. So you can reach out to me directly if you have any questions about the grant opportunities as they come up. You can also use the general Proud Michigan Educator inbox, which is monitored by several of us on staff. So you can reach those places directly, but you can also contact me and I'll jump on a Zoom call with you and talk things through for your specific institution, or I'm happy to sit and talk with your specific partners. And then the website for all of this future Proud Michigan Educator work is www.michigan.gov/FPME, Future Proud Michigan Educator. When you go to that website, you'll see those 4 categories of educators broken down, as well as any resources for each type of educator. And then from there, you can also reach a grant page that outlines all of the grant opportunities for future educators that were in the budget and will drive you to the resources for those things. So for example, the Treasury monitored grants are all housed on that homepage of grants, and then you can reach their FAQs and their contact information from that one hub.
Application for student teaching stipends and all the other things, is that the same application just outlined?
No, that's run by the Treasury, Department of Treasury.
Application ready?
That application they expect to open in October.
I'll have more. Couple slides after this.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sean and I are meeting regularly with the Treasury to try and make sure that we're aware of what they're doing because we know that you're going to ask us. So we both, Sean spoke at and I attended the webinar that they offered last week, which was also recorded if you need it. And they are continuing to work with their vendor to build an application that will work for their purposes. So they're really hopeful that by the end of the month it will be out. They continue to tell us that that's their optimistic deadline, but I don't know any more than that. Sure. You can do that. Yeah, absolutely. Anything else? Go ahead.
This is a question more of. If you have any grant, any district does, and they get a GYO grant.
Yes.
And then you run some.
Mhm. Yeah, the grants that are run specifically out of Office of Educator Excellence are not exclusive to one another. Anything?
Do they have to choose just one higher ed institution to partner with?
No, they could choose multiple institutions for multiple purposes, just depending, there might be one that's geographically close and it serves one function. And there might be one that's fully online and serves a different function, for example.
Maybe I hear correctly too. The grant that you spoke about, the Grow Your Own, it's from 2022 to 2026, essentially 4 years. Is that just for graduate programs or all route, or is that if the student comes in as an undergrad to finish?
That is for, make sure I say this right, Tom, degree-bearing institutions for initial certification or additional endorsements
Advanced, advanced.
with advanced degrees. It is not for alternative route funding.
Get that up on here. So it is specifically, the Grow Your Own grants in 27B are specifically for degree programs. So programs that end in a bachelor's degree or an advanced degree. So, and they have to be school personnel that do this. So how we have interpreted that is school personnel pursuing initial certification in the context of a bachelor's degree, school personnel seeking initial teacher certification in the context of an advanced degree, or currently certified teachers pursuing additional endorsements tied to an advanced degree. So reading specialist is an example of something like that.
And I should also mention that when we say school personnel, we've had a lot of questions about who classifies as school personnel. We are inclusive to substitute teachers and long-term subs, despite the fact that they're paid by staffing companies most often. We consider them to be school personnel.
Can you clarify if we have initial teacher preparation program for post-baccalaureate students that does not lead to degree? Would that still qualify?
Yeah, the language of the bill is that it is degree, or the law is that it is degree tied.
Okay, and so I think that answers my question, but I just feel the need to ask another clarification. If they're getting like a post-baccalaureate certificate, which we would consider them an alumni, if they are getting a certificate with that.
No, but this isn't the only pot of money that they could access. So that's also key. So it is a degree. It is tied to degrees.
If your alt route includes a degree. would that count?
Say it again, Ben.
If your alt route is a master's program.
Yes, you are uniquely positioned. U of M Flint is uniquely positioned among all routes for this because it is explicitly tied to a degree. I can't say that, but I think, Kate, you can correct me. Warrior Pathway is also tied to a master's degree or not? Okay, all right. So that's also tied, but there are others that are not tied to degrees. There are others that are not tied to credits at all. And so those we will deal with in that second piece, right? And on the middle bar, the money we have allocated there. So that we're not trying to exclude programs.
So just as a reminder, the darker color at the bottom is the 27B funding that I just walked you through, where we anticipate our application coming out in December. The middle bar, the blue bar, is an opportunity for programs that are not degree bearing so that we can be inclusive to those programs. It's simply that the amount of money allotted is smaller. So if you'd like to talk more about that middle opportunity, because you have a program, for example, that is a post-bac, feel free to reach out and we can talk through the opportunities inside of that funding as well.
Just to confirm, you said that the future educator fellowship and stipends and the grow your own programs are sort of incompatible. A district with paraprofessionals who designs a relationship with an EPP in which a paraprofessional is earning that degree cannot also access the fellowship and the stipend. Is that correct?
Right, not concurrently.
Oh, okay.
It's the question is, yeah, concurrently, and that's the specific word used in law. So that there's, and I was going to unpack that a little bit on a future slide, and that's fine. But yeah, that's the language of it is grow your own programs, not people benefiting from a grow your own or a program that's funded through the grow your own grant cannot concurrently be receiving funding under 27A or 27C. So those things. So it would be ideal if there's a like sort of an articulation sequence here built into MOUs. But those are the Treasury grants. If you think about it as sort of, independent economic agents, those are going to, so individuals apply for them and individuals receive the money. There's a bit of a pass through in both of them. So one goes through a district, one will go through an EPP to take care of. But that's an individual doing. For the grow your own, it is to a partnership. So the entity that has to apply is a district or a consortium of districts under the banner of one. And the money then goes to the district to work through. So it's a different relationship between consumer and let's say bank and department. So yeah, and lender, right?
If you have a parapro that doesn't have a bachelor's degree and is seeking that initial cert, they can go ahead and apply for this, but there's not going to be enough time. So say they start in January or next fall, they have maybe 3 years then with the life of that grow your own grant. And so then that final year would be one that they could then access 27A and 27C if we build.
Yeah, you could, I mean, I can see building like articulated funds. The one thing with 27A and 27C is those are right now, they are allocated for 1 year. So it's only in the 2022-23 budget, and there is no language about carryover of unspent funds or what's called work projecting, which is, the way there is with 27B. 27B has language in it that says, you didn't spend anything, it's going to go into the next year, and you can keep going with it because it's federal money. The biggest pot of it is federal money. With the state money, it's year by year. So the only legislative update that we have now is there's a bill that sort of turns the Michigan Future Educator Fellowship into something that is outside of annual budget bills and outside the annual state aid and is an ongoing thing to be funded. So it's not like reliant on, well, we got the state aid budget. Let's look at it. Well, we'll just cut this one out. So it sort of codifies it more permanently. So that's
grow your own. They can roll over time. So then they in theory would have enough money.
Yeah, the money has to be encumbered by December 31st, 2024, and spent by December 31st, 2026. So you're projecting out into that space. And we're trying to make it, I mean, it sounds like, oh, all these restrictions. We're trying to make it flexible so that, like, if your district that you're working with, they planned to work with these 5 support staff to get certified, and one of them leaves. But they have somebody else that they want to put in, that they could do that rather than say, we only approved you for those specific 5 people. So we want it to be able that a district can make those swaps, or, you've got somebody in there and they're not working out, right? That this person it's not going to work, but they have somebody else that they can swap in. That would be allowable. Sorry, yes, Sherry.
Non-public schools are not eligible to apply, right?
We, right. Yeah, that's
A charter can apply?
public charters. One thing we do know that happens is some of the non-public schools have fiscal relationships with their ISDs, and ISDs apply for money on their behalf and pass through. That's not the case everywhere, and some ISDs, I'll use professional language, say hell no to that, and they won't apply on behalf of them for some things, but others there are. So like that money we rolled out earlier this year, there were some individuals employed in non-public schools whose ISDs served as their fiscal agent to apply and bring them through. And I know that that's very important to a large number of you. So. Now, would you like to take a break now? Yes, all right, let's take 10 and come back, and then we have more goodies for you. Thanks. My apologies. All right, yes, if we come on back and yeah, online also. Here. All right. For all this $500 million investment in educator workforce to have an impact and have a measurable impact on the immediate, immediately on the educator workforce ecosystem and long-term, we need innovations. And not only do we need innovations, we need to know about innovations and we need to spread the knowledge of innovations. There are 28 educator preparation institutions in Michigan that offer teacher preparation programs, okay? There are 10 alternative route programs. Now there's some overlap because we have alternative routes housed at University of Michigan, Flint, University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and Wayne State University. So it's not a total of 38, but if you round it down, about 35. There are 32 entities waiting in line for their opportunity to become a new educator preparation provider because they don't think the system is helping them. And we don't want to double the number of providers in our state and drain, well, thank you. Drain the pool of potential teachers to the point that no programs are sustainable. So what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to answer to a remote district who says, there's nothing for me. There is nothing for my teachers. No one will help me. We need to be able to say, that's not true. You might live 500 miles away from the nearest educator preparation institution, but did you know that they will come to you, right? We have entities from everything from entrepreneurs who want to make some money. They've got little LLCs out there, some of them out of state, to defunct educator preparation programs. So some universities had closed theirs over the years, right? And wanting to come back. Community colleges, ISDs. I mean, it's a lot and it's a long list. And the superintendent does have the authority to lift the moratorium on new educator preparation providers in order to entertain new ones. And we would rather make sure that the ones we have are well supported, thriving, and doing state-of-the-art practices in teacher preparation. And so this is the call to action. We know and have on our website a list of expedited educator preparation programs. All right. Not all, we also have a list of alternative route programs. We refer people to this, but it's an expedited one. These are programs that have waived some administrative rule. in order to operate. So one a very rich example are programs that are special education only, right? They're waiving the general ed requirement or endorsement. And all signs point to this being rather gangbusters and a game changer for school districts. We have others that waive the core content course requirement for individuals. It sort of looks like an alternative route, but you have the support of an approved program there for any individuals who, you know, are not able to pass the MTTC and become certified in the areas they want. So we have this expedited programs list, and it's pretty robust, and it gets more and more robust each year. What we don't have is a good list that we can publicize of programs that don't waive administrative rule. Because we know that there are. We know that there are innovative programs and partnerships, place-based programs, online programs, hybrid programs, competency-based programs out there that have not requested a waiver of anything. You're taking that approved program on the road to another location, to another campus, to another district, and using the powers in your toolbox as institutions to accelerate individuals' progress. But if there has been no waiver of any rule, then we don't know about it unless we hear it in conversations. And I'll call out Gail. Gail and I talked about a program with Grand Rapids Public Schools and Grand Rapids Community College. Very nicely articulated program. And this was before we had money that we could support that work. And it did not involve any waiver of rules at all. It did not involve any waiver of the program. It was just a very well articulated 2+2+2, you know, taking students from, say, Explore and CTE all the way through their bachelor's degree and their teacher certification. I love it. We have not had a space to publicize that on our website, to be able to say, look, right in your backyard district that wants to prepare its own teachers is a vetted institution with a record of success working with the district next door to you. And you know what? Let's matchmake you. Let's get you together and see if you can do that. Because what happens with a lot of these people who want to, or entities that want to be providers, is when we tell them how long it's going to take, like it'd be like 3 years before you're up and running. And then national accreditation being a thing. They steadily lose the appetite for this, but some still keep pushing. Yes.
Has there been any talk of programs that you, official 2+2 community college have an opportunity for the students who are enrolled in the 2+2 to count as education for things like stipend?
Yes.
Has it been talked about saying yes, go ahead?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, you're right. Yes, yes. And there are articulation agreements out there where it is, and I see nods from the people I was hoping to see nods from, that credit you earn just directly right to the educator preparation institution that ends up making that recommendation. So it is seamless. And I take Ed 201 at Lansing Community College, and it becomes Ed 201 on my, or Ed 301 on my EPI transcript.
So that part I get, like, for example, for the stipend, or not stipend, the fellowship, the $10,000 fellowships, if they're enrolled in a program that's a 2 and 2 that's going to need to convert certification, but they're still at community college, which is not an ECT.
Yep.
Can they get the $10,000 while they're still in?
You're going to have to work it. You're going to have to work it. This is what we did at Miller when I was there. So people applied, if they didn't have a bachelor's degree at all, or didn't have an associate's degree, they just came, and they wanted to be teachers. they would be admitted to Kellogg Community College and they would be conditionally admitted to Miller College, right? And we would build a 4-year program plan for them. Every course that they were to take at a community college had a corresponding course number and name in the Miller College catalog and taxonomy of courses. So as they took those classes, they were making progress toward their education degree. That's how we got people's financial aid to work too. So that financial aid could pass through. Yes.
I'm a little confused. Talking about the institution next door, and then you referred to 500 miles away. What if we partnered with a district that was 500 miles away? What about student teaching? Do you have any recommendations of how to make that happen?
Yeah. Hire and train people who are there. Work with the wisdom of our teacher workforce, right? Our talented teachers and administrators are an underutilized force in general. Now, you could think of lots of examples where not, but an underutilized force in helping vet the next generation, right? And so getting those people in those locations, so you're not obviously going back and forth, because we have very tight, strong, grow your own partnerships right now that are separated between like 500 to 800 miles between the university and the school district. And so the collective that we have here has the knowledge and skill to do that. We seek to know more about consortium programs, partnerships between universities to do things. I know some exist where, like health and PE, for example, one's doing the health, one's doing the PE. One of them recommends for the health and PE endorsement. We know cohorted programs that meet high needs, and we're thinking high needs in terms of subject area. We're thinking high needs in terms of geography. So our rural schools. Michigan State published the report on rural schools and the lack of rural focused policy and investment in the state. And it's a sobering report. And it's fantastic. It also has the ear of our state superintendent, Dr. Rice. And so that's a place that needs to be served. And when I say it's a place that needs to be served, it's all around us. Like, you know, this is, you look at the maps and that report where it defines rural and non-rural, and there's more Michigan that's rural than is non-rural, even places you might not expect. And so, yeah, these kind of place-based pieces. Candidates, historically underrepresented candidates to diversify the workforce. You saw the statistics from Holly's presentation working with the Explore students. There is a very diverse pool of potential teachers and principals and counselors and school social workers out there that want to be educators. And it's in your best interests, I think, because CAPE will ask you about this, to bring them into the fold, to work with them, to capitalize on the funds of knowledge that they bring to the teacher education experience and refine them and bring them to meeting our teacher preparation standards. It's in caps because it's a real, like, bona fide thing from the federal government, registered apprenticeship. Future Dartep, I think we can bring one of our colleagues from the Office of Career and Tech Ed to speak more about the registered apprenticeship model. But there's nothing about the registered apprenticeship model, and it's a very clearly defined federal thing that a grow your own program, I'll call it out, Saginaw Valley's ACR program, for example, the partnership Grand Valley had built with Muskegon Heights. Those walk right into what a registered apprenticeship is all about. And it's this kind of partnership between the workplace and the preparing institution. And you do this, right? What we want to get a handle on is all of those innovations and partnerships and things that we can publicize so we can help you spread the message that, excuse me for one moment, that what's wrong with the educator ecosystem in Michigan can be fixed with what's right with the educator workforce ecosystem, okay? And that's what we want to do. We will be having, Gina is generating a survey to gather this information on existing programs. So things, we want to get a handle on what's out there. We want to be able to publicize what's out there. Then we want to support new ones. So once we get a handle on what's out there, so this will be before the next Dartep, we want to get an inventory of all of these things so that we can start that matchmaking. And then that inventory will provide models for institutions that don't have it, or institutions that have some innovations that haven't tried others. So we'll keep an eye out for that. But there's one other piece to this, because it's not all about you all go do stuff, because we as a state agency need to do things too. If there are barriers to the innovations that you would like to do, right? We need to know about it. We know some barriers, many of which have been dropped over the years from administrative rules. So remember, everyone had to have, so Kevin asked me about this in an email. It was a general and liberal education requirement listed in rule. And then you had to have a secondary major, and then you had to have a secondary minor. If you were elementary, you had to have 3 programs or a major in one. And we have dropped all of that. And so programs that were formerly experimental, waiving those rules, aren't experimental anymore. They're the rule. So we know another barrier is that gen ed, special ed pairing, right? That requirement. We have experimental programs now that are proceeding and generating data to show that this is an effective, someone who's special education only, be a really, really effective teacher and get a job and do great things with our kids, right? But we don't always know what other barriers are out there or what perceived barriers there are. And we want to know about that because we want to help you with building these programs, capitalizing on the success of them, of the existing ones, expanding, right? Making us be a sort of a beacon of innovative practices. When some of those original bills for the grants that we've been talking about referenced just generically educator preparation institutions. That means had the language of the bills gone through, Western governors could have picked up a bunch of grant money, right? Grand Canyon University could have picked up a bunch of money, right? When we let legislators know, hey, you don't talk about Michigan approved in these things, we're going to send all this money out of state. They were very clear, no, this is Michigan. This is money for Michigan to support Michigan. So again, we're going to keep an eye out for a survey to come through. We will send it to deans and directors so that top level, so we get just one central response from each EPI. Because again, we want to know all about this. We want to be able to put it up on our website. We want to be able to direct people to you instead of what we sometimes have to do now. Hi, I want to be an English teacher. Great. Here are the places that are have English programs. Which of them are online? I don't know. You got to call them. There's a lot of English programs to call. Yes. Which one is closest to me? I know where you are. I can tell you a little bit about that, but I can't tell you about innovations, if it's not there. So that's the call to action. Innovators and innovations wanted. I wanted to say just a couple of words on the two Treasury grants, the Michigan Future Educator Fellowship and the Michigan Future Educator Student Teacher Stipend. Many of you were able to participate in and your financial aid officers were able to participate in a webinar last Friday with me. I was there. I spoke for a little bit about Grow Your Own, not much. Again, these are, administered by Treasury. This is what it looks like on our webpage. Holly said, when you go to our webpage, you'll find the links to all of these things. There they are. They are updating the FAQs on their webpage with the questions that were posed in the Q&A. I am eager for the recording to be released and the slides to be released so we can distribute that out to you immediately. Again, Holly and I meet every Tuesday with two representatives of Treasury, and then there's a large monthly conclave of us from Treasury and MDE to talk through things more. They need to know what educator preparation is, and we have provided as much and continue to provide lots of information and context for them to be able to see this. One question that does keep getting raised, and I'll answer it before I call it Christine, is we have this happens to you all. Student teacher, they're doing their thing and they need to fill in and be a sub for a day, or they need to, they've done their 12 or 10 or 12 weeks and now they're sort of in the phase out. Can they be hired as a sub, or do they lose access to that $9,600? The answer is they can sub. Okay. They can't be a long-term sub for the whole semester getting paid as a teacher of record or getting paid as a substitute teacher every day, that whole experience. But for those occasional pieces, yes. So the language that Treasury is emphasizing is whether it is paid by the district for the student teaching experience. If I am subbing after 10 weeks of serving under my mentor teacher or 5 weeks of serving or whatever, and I am being asked by the school to sub, and you all have policies about when people can do this and how much they can do. That is not being paid by the district for the student teaching experience. It's being paid by the district for a subbing experience. Right? So that's to clarify that. Now, Christine, you raised, and then I'll go in the back after that.
The biggest thing that I'm unclear on is that what semesters we can apply and our current student teachers.
Yes. Okay, the question is, when does this start taking effect? Fall 2022 student teachers on the student teacher side. Yes, you can apply as soon as that application opens in at the Treasury. Now, when are they going to get their money? It's going to be a little bit later. It's going to be delayed, right? But it is a $9,600 stipend that goes straight through to the student, right? Can't withhold anything. That's part of the deal. And yeah, they're not going to get it. They're not going to get that money at the start of the semester. They're probably, for future semesters, they're going to be getting it sort of in the midway part. So thinking about budgeting and all of that with them. But yes, the fall 2022 group is the first one. Again, that application will open this month. We've heard, the last we heard is like mid to mid-late October for the application. What they're trying to work out is the promissory note piece, because if somebody doesn't finish their commitments, it turns into a loan. And so they need to get that set with their legal team for that. Yeah, the fellowship, yes. But they're going to open these applications at the same time. So that's that. But in the back, you had your hand up.
But I appreciate that you've spoken about the long-term.
Yeah.
Have to define a window of time
It's a good question. I don't know.
Our 15 semester, maybe 15 weeks, maybe a little longer than that.
Yeah.
But the stuff shortage, an unexpected event happening in the school, like that requires our teacher to convert to the Washington stuff. Can happen anywhere.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
Any day on your own.
Yeah.
But if it's week 5, that's for many of the students. We brought the team together and worked with them so much.
Right.
And it's going to be ready for the weekend and serve that part. And the students in their learning.
Yeah, we're gonna have to work with we'll work with Treasury on that scenario. Because they were like, what are all the scenarios in which somebody could get paid while they're doing this work? Well, people could be a long-term sub, they could be called in here or there. And so, yeah, that's something that we will work with them to help unpack, to provide stuff. So, yeah, Jane.
Our question.
Sure.
First one I think is really, this now is available to student teachers in any place, in public and non.
Correct.
Correct? Okay, thanks. Second question, application. Everyone who applies will receive full stipend, or are they going to differentiate? Are they basing anything on need anymore?
No, not in the student teacher stipend. It's a straight 9,600. We've got to verify. We've got to verify, one, that they are indeed student teachers. And so one thing that is written in the written updates, which we won't have time to unpack really live because we're running a little bit over, is we're changing the calendar of when we ask for those student teacher rosters so that we can get that verification to Treasury. They also need to verify with the district. So there's like this 2 level of verification that they have to do to make sure that somebody qualifies. But yeah, it's a straight $9,600.
No fast stuff, right? For
Right.
student teaching.
Yep, no fast.
Apply.
Yeah, Kate.
Are we thinking about, is there any wiggle room in thinking about when we discuss? Like then, the hard part about it in the middle of the semester is that the barrier for our students is the one to stop out and not see it. They can't afford to live without having a full-time job.
Mhm.
But if they don't get paid until this semester, like what are they doing on from August to October?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a,
Repeat the question for the people online.
good question. Thank you. I did see this little thing say, I'll let Sean know. So wait for Brian to tell me. Yeah, the question is wiggle room on the disbursement dates for this. It's got these something we have to work out with Treasury. They have a defined calendar for when they can release money, and they only have they're like quarterly things that they can release money for these. It's not like state aid payments, which come out every month, except for September. There's like a quarterly payment thing, and that's what their system is. So I don't think there's much wiggle room, but they have to do some budgeting, I think. Yes. Yeah, sorry. Maggie, okay, yeah.
She said that depending on the amount of funds that's left and
Oh,
it may
yeah.
turn to a need-based.
Right, yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Yeah, the amount of money that is allocated, the amount of money that was allocated by the legislature then got divided by the average number of people who are student teachers to come up with these figures, right? And so, yes, that again, be first come, first serve. We anticipate though some people will qualify for grow your own funding, right? Outside of, outside of this. And vice versa. Some people who, might be in a grow your own program, it might actually, this would be a better fit for them. So triaging the source of money to best utilize all of it. But yeah, if they're running low, because it is only a 1-year allocation. It is only a 1-year allocation. It's not intended to stay there for 4 years the way some of our other funds are. Beth.
Is there a constraint that a Michigan school and Michigan residents?
Is there a constraint that it's a Michigan school and a Michigan resident? It has to be a Michigan school. It has to be a Michigan school. Not for the, for the fellowship, yes. Yes, that answers the constraints. For the fellowship, yes. For the stipend, no. It does have to be a Michigan school. Out of state or out of country, right? Jillian Davidson sent me a question about split student teaching, where somebody's student teaches for a chunk of the year in Michigan, and then the other they're in Florida or Dominican Republic or something. I think those are the two examples she gave. I sent that to Treasury. I said, I don't know how common this is. I suspect it's more common that somebody does their entire student teaching experience out of state or out of country. They're thinking about it. I think that was the end of the day piece that I sent yesterday. So, Carl.
I just, for the stipend, they're not required to file FAFSA.
Correct.
The reason I'm asking is I got a couple of international students.
Right.
Who are student teaching. I understand their international students are eligible for the stipend.
Yeah, one of the things that Treasury asked us were, our international students, can international students student teach in Michigan? Or is that a violation of their visas? And the answer is absolutely, they can student teach here and it's not a violation of their student visas. So they could be, they're in a Michigan school, they're doing this. They could be funded. Yeah. And again, I keep forgetting to repeat, Carl's question was about international students being eligible for the student teacher stipend. And the answer is yes, provided they're in a Michigan school. Yeah, right.
So a couple questions online. Are student teachers under the stipend or fellowship going to have PIC numbers assigned?
I mean, no, not immediately, but we're come into the garage and see the projects that are in half-formed things. One of them is a consideration for something that gets people into MOEX like right away or more, which will be the new one, and gets them in there. But I don't, Sarah, if you'd like to come to the mic. So
Well, I don't know the answer exactly.
we don't have a clear one.
But I'll do it in a second, but I believe the answer is for employment, they get a PIC number. And so as long as they're employees, they have a PIC number, so they're recorded in red as well. So Sean, it's not just the logs piece.
Yeah, true.
So they should have a PIC number because they're employed. If they're employed, for just straight student teachers, wouldn't have anything.
Right. So I'll just repeat what Sarah said for those online. If your student teacher is somebody who has been employed in a school district, they should have a PIC number through Registry of Educated Personnel when that is all set so that should pre-exist. For those who are just let's say garden variety student teachers, that's not meant to be an insult, but they haven't, they've not been employed, they wouldn't have a PIC number. People who may have done some subbing, though, if they've got a sub permit issued to them at some point, they'll have a PIC number. Yeah, so there'll be some, your most like traditional person who has not come through the system in any way, shape, or form and been employed doesn't have a PIC number at this point in this. But is there a second question?
And for the fellowship, can we define admitted into a teacher preparation? Sorry, let me get my eyes closer.
Yeah.
Can we define admitted into an educator preparation program? Could a pre-education student qualify as completing prereq coursework?
Yeah. I think you'd want to structure that gateway so it's sort of unambiguous that they are admitted to a prep program, whether they're admitted and it's a conditional admit or something like that. Holly. Yeah, there is a credit hour piece in there, so that they have to have gotten to a certain point in there to be able to get the fellowship. Again, that's unpacked on the Treasury website. So, yeah, Kate?
So for programs that it did before the 56-hour threshold, does that mean that after that they register after hitting 56 hours, they're eligible?
You're going to have to direct that to Treasury, please. Yep, they pick up these things. So yeah, that's part of the nuts and bolts on their end for that. Yeah.
So the money for the stipend.
Yeah, it's coming to the university, right?
Does that mean that there is a close date on the app? There will be a close date on the app so that information they get that and then that money gets distributed in one big pot.
Yeah. Okay. So for online, Gail's question is there a close date on apps for the student teacher stipend? Because the money comes from the Treasury to the Educator Preparation Institution through its financial office and all of that. So is there a close date on that whereby then it's closed and then all the money gets dumped out into it? And they haven't talked about it as having like a close date for the application as sort of open, because you have people for the say winter term, but then, midway through the winter term, they want to apply for the fall term money. So there's not an end date that is currently put into place on it. And they look at it as a first come, first serve. But the money does get dumped to the institutions. That's a technical word, in these defined quarterly payment things. Yeah. So that's a logistical piece. Yeah, I had this weird situation when I was at Miller of somebody who started, they didn't think they were going to student teach. And then 10 weeks before the end of 12 weeks before the end of the semester, that's the rule. Of a 16-week, they decided, no, I'm ready to student teach. So that was like we got them in and got everything. That person would probably not, they could probably get stipend money, but it would be a lot later than everybody else who would be getting stipend money. All right. Yes.
Clarify the year that this is it going to December 26th, the winter semester and the following fall?
Yeah. So the question is clarifying the terms of this. So right now it's in the fall 2022, winter 2023. I imagine so we're going to be in budget negotiation for next year right away. We understand the intent of the legislature is to continue this through beyond. The money that's there is allocated for this year only. So we would need another allocation that covers the fall of 23 and winter of 24. So
you're talking a school year, not a calendar.
Right.
Is that for both programs?
Yeah, these are both state money. The question was, is this for both? Is that true for both programs? And the answer is yes, because it is state money. I had mentioned earlier a bill to codify the Michigan Future Educator Fellowship. So it's not tied into budget bills, but rather is an ongoing thing that gets appropriated, here and there. And that I'll share that bill. I don't have the bill number off the top of my head, but yeah, Jane, we're walking into everyone's job like time, which then also walks into lunchtime. So,
Senior year, a student could qualify for fellowship, but then they would not qualify for student teaching stipend in their spring semester. Is that correct? Because the fellowship is a year.
you can't receive, it's the concurrent funding, right? That's the issue. Is you can't have concurrent funding across these things. So they could get it.
Fellowship, take the. Yeah.
No, I know, because it's two separate semesters. They're not double dipping.
The fellowship is a semester allocation. I thought it was a year. No,
It's a year.
I mean, yeah, I think there's a choice to break that up. And again, yeah,
If they apply all-
right. Again, we're gonna have to work with Treasury on this, so we're not running those apps.
Might break that fellowship over 2 semesters.
Yeah. Right, you might break it up. Okay, I'm gonna do a couple of quick things, then we'll break for Java likes. I don't know if any Dartep leaders would like to reconfigure some of the parts of the calendar, the agenda. But very, very quick, our colleague Beatrice Harrison wanted everyone to be reminded of changes in names to school counselor credentials. It is unpacked in more detail in the written updates. So the name changes. It's not changing requirements on school counselor credentials. There are just changes in the names of some of the different credentials that we have. And that's in rule and all of that. From data and accountability, criminal history considerations. There are 2 relevant law citations there that EPPs should have policies in place around criminal disclosure, which I believe always do, and background checks, and then the impact on enrollment in program and recommending for credentials. I don't know, Sarah, is there something else Kate wanted unpacked about this?
A little bit the deans and directors meeting. I'm curious about policies and procedures. A couple of cases that we've had recently that we need some information from you all and to talk about if you don't have procedures and policies, we'd like you to start putting those in place.
Okay, to repeat for online, what Sarah said was we talked about in deans and directors, job alike, about policies and procedures around criminal history, that if you don't have these in place, we want them to be in place. So there'll be more conversation around that. And then again, disclosure and background checks. Results only tell you of convictions that occurred up to the date of the fingerprinting. And so given this, we recommend at the start of the new year district, provide all employees with arraignment and conviction disclosure forms and run iChats on staff to determine if any convictions have occurred since the date of the fingerprinting. So someone could get fingerprinted and they're all clear, and then they go out and they celebrate a little bit too much, and then that's all negated. Yeah, anyway, we'll talk more in the deans and directors job like. All right, we've done a lot of Q&A throughout, so we will continue with Q&A during job likes. Do we have the locations for the job likes? Come over here to the mic, and then who goes where?
Okay, I am going to introduce Nancy Hahn from Pearson. She is here to talk about how we help our candidates get accommodations if needed on the MTTC test. So we are scheduled till 2. Nancy, we may go a little over depending on question and answer, but I'm going to give the floor to Nancy.
All right. Can everyone hear me okay? No, let me get a little closer. That better? Okay. All right. This is fun. I get to see myself and okay. All right. Again, my name's Nancy Hahn, I'm a senior area director at the Evaluation Systems Group of Pearson, and MTTC is one of the programs that I manage. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today to be able to share information about alternative testing arrangements for the MTTC program. What I'd like to do today is to provide some general information about alternative testing arrangements, to discuss the process that candidates use when applying for alternative testing arrangements. I'll try to suggest some ways that you can support candidates as they're applying for those arrangements. I'll review documentation requirements. There are different kinds of documentation requirements depending upon the candidate's needs. I was told that you would have interest in learning accommodations that are available for English learners. So I'd like to go over that and then hopefully leave time for Q&A. All right. Whoops, too far.
I'll let you drive.
You'll let me drive?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what are alternative testing arrangements? Okay, basically, an alternative testing arrangements refers to any changes in standard testing conditions, procedures, and/or materials for an MTTC test. The Americans with Disabilities Act, as well as its amendments, they prohibit discrimination on the basis of disability for a wide range of circumstances. So what does this mean for teacher certification testing? With respect to that, we apply two key principles. One is to provide reasonable alternative testing arrangements for candidates with disabilities. So we provide the arrangements. The second key principle is that we need to maintain the integrity of the tests that we are delivering for the MTTC program. These tests enable candidates to become certified and to work with students in Michigan schools. So we need to maintain the integrity. The changes that we make to the test cannot change what the test is measuring. So those are the principles we apply. The other piece that I want to point out for this is that our process is designed to help candidates on an individual basis, on a case-by-case basis, so that we have an alternative arrangements coordinator who will work with candidates as needed to help them if they are having difficulties with navigating the system. If they have questions about documentation requirements, they will work with them. Also, sometimes it's to help the candidate determine what accommodation would work best for them as well. So those are a few key points of alternative testing arrangements. The MTTC website has all of the documentation needed for anyone interested in alternative testing arrangements. And we're going to try to go to the website now. Technology is my friend. Okay, great. And so there are multiple ways for a candidate or an interested person to find out about alternative testing arrangements. There's a Find Info tab. If you scroll up to the top, you'll see there are multiple ways to get to that. I personally think the easiest thing to do is to select tests. So the candidate can just go to the test that they want to take. Let's say I want to be a chemistry teacher. That's there. If you look on that right-hand side, they can just click requesting alternative testing arrangements. And it takes them to this page. There's a lot of information on this page, and that's for a variety of reasons. One is has to do with documentation that we need to provide. we need to make sure that our policies and procedures are consistent with ADA requirements. And so there is a lot of information that we need to share with candidates. We've done our best to organize it in a way that will help a candidate work their way through the material. A good way to support your candidates is to encourage them to read all of the information on the website. Take the time to read that information. If they have questions about what they're reading, they can call the MTTC customer service. There's an 800 number on the website. There's also a little email form that they can fill out. I do want to acknowledge that evaluation systems is part of Pearson. And Pearson is a very, very large organization. Some of you may deal with Pearson for textbooks and things like that. That is not the part of Pearson that does the teacher certification testing program. So if you have candidates that you have a question about alternative testing arrangements or about the MTTC program, and you have a Pearson rep for your test books, it's unlikely they're going to be able to help you with the teacher certification testing program. So you may want to keep, you all can use the customer service number. You all can submit emails as well to our contact center. Our goal is to, with the candidates is we will work directly with the candidates. At some point, candidates may need to work directly with Pearson VUE when they're scheduling an appointment, but I'll get to that down the road. So we're at the program website. If you can, do you mind clicking on the little blue text at the top, right there? We've recently added this information to the website. This is our most often requested accommodations. And we just put that out there at the very beginning. I do want to caution you and caution candidates to not think that only the accommodations listed here are what we provide. That's just a sampling. When a candidate makes their request, we encourage them to put down any arrangement that they think they would need to be able to be successful. So we can close that. And then let's just click on the overview. So the overview provides information at a very high level. It talks about, we provide accommodations for examinees with disabilities. We provide accommodations for people where English isn't the primary language. We also have accommodations for nursing mothers. There are two kinds of accommodations, some that do not require pre-approval, and then most which do require pre-approval. If we can try and go back now to the PowerPoint. Beautiful. Okay. When you think about alternative testing arrangements, some arrangements are very minimal, meaning that the changes to the testing conditions or the materials are basically negligible on the testing situation. For example, think about a candidate who breaks their leg or has a leg injury and needs to prop up their leg at the testing center. That's not going to impact the test, right? And then you can go and to requests that require sort of a moderate kind of accommodation. And then you can go all the way down to things that require a more than moderate accommodation. We will work with candidates in all of these circumstances. Accommodations that don't need pre-approval are pretty minimal. Just want to let you know that, all Pearson Professional Centers are wheelchair accessible. Our third-party sites are also should be wheelchair accessible. If they are not accessible, on the description of the test site itself, there should be information provided about any potential obstacles. So no pre-approvals needed for things like that. No pre-approvals are needed for visual enhancements. The tests themselves, candidates have the ability to increase the font size on the tests up to 200%. Anything above 200% does require additional work on our end and is considered a modification. There are different kinds of comfort aids. Bring a pillow if you have a back problem, things like that. A note about frequent or unscheduled breaks. Candidates are permitted to take breaks for restrooms, to take medication, to use an inhaler, things like that. However, that time that's taken is part of the total time the candidate is given to test. So if a candidate has a condition that would require a substantial number of breaks, if there's some sort of condition that requires them to stop and eat every X amount of time, they would need to submit a request. We would work with them. We might suggest to them, you need to request 50% additional time. If you have the documentation, we can provide that as well. So there are comfort aids that are allowed for candidates if they have a cane, if they have a brace, if they are wearing glasses, right? One of the things that candidates sometimes don't realize is that we need to inspect all of those things. If I went to a Pearson Center to test and I had a cane, I would be allowed to take that cane into the test room, but they would ask to look at it. Their job is to protect the integrity of the tests that we're administering. These are high stakes tests. There is a list of available comfort aids. I have a link to it here. It worked last time. We might as well try it. So this is the Pearson VUE comfort aids list. So you can see that they are allowed to provide a variety of aids into the testing situation. All right, so we can go back now. Okay, now let's spend a little bit of time talking about what do candidates need to do to request the alternative arrangements. The first thing they should do is review those documentation requirements. It's divided into 3 categories. So if the candidate has a learning or cognitive disability, they should focus on the requirements in that section. If it's a different kind of disability or a different kind of impairment, they should focus on the next section. If English isn't their primary language, there's a section for that. They should review those documentation requirements and collect any of the materials that are needed to support their request. Then they should register for the test. As they're going through the test registration process, there's a screen where they're asked, do you intend to request alternative testing arrangements? They will select yes then. They should not schedule their test appointment. If you are working with candidates who want alternative testing arrangements and they schedule a test appointment before they get all of the approvals, those arrangements will not be available for the candidates. Another, I think, helpful piece of information is to remind candidates, depending upon the kind of request that they need, alternative testing arrangements just requires more time to prepare. If, for example, we have a candidate who needs to have a recorder or a reader for a test form. We have to have that candidate test in a separate room. We have to arrange for appropriate staff to be there to support the candidate throughout the testing. And so that just takes longer. So as the candidates are trying to work through their planning of when they need to take their MTTC tests, please encourage them, if they are requesting alternative testing arrangements, to take the initial time needed into account when they're scheduling. So they register for their test, they don't schedule their appointment. The next thing they need to do is to submit an alternative testing arrangements request form. This form needs to be submitted every time they register. Let's say candidate registers for the test, they provide their first test. They provide the documentation they need to have a reader. Okay, they are approved for a reader. The next time they sign up for their next MTTC, they still need to submit the alternative testing arrangements request form. They will not need to resubmit the documentation as long as there's been no changes. But they do need to submit the form with every registration. Okay. Once a candidate submits their alternative testing arrangements request form, they get an auto-generated email from our system, basically telling them that that's what they've done. It takes us up to 3 weeks to process those requests. So they need to give us a little bit of time to do that. It depends on the time of year the candidates test. There are some parts of the year where we have lots of candidates testing, and then like September actually tends to be a time where we don't have so many candidates testing, right? Because school has just started. They should also keep an eye on their spam folder. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen that sometimes emails from us will go into their spam folder. If they're not seeing a resolution from us in that 3-week period, I would encourage them to contact our customer service and say, what's going on? I submitted this 3 weeks ago. This is what you said. Then once they get a resolution email from us, they should follow the instructions provided in that email. And basically, there are 3 kinds of resolutions that happen. Easiest is everything's approved. So I requested additional time and a reader for my test. All of those were approved. There will be instructions in that for what I now need to do to schedule my test form. Because it's a reader, I likely am going to need a separate testing room. So there will be a number in that email for me to call, a way to reach out to Pearson VUE to set up my test appointment. Sometimes a request is marked incomplete. What that means is that a candidate has supported documentation to submit some of the requests made. Let's go back to the idea of I requested additional time and a reader. My documentation that I provided supported the use of additional time, but not a reader. There will be information in that email saying we need more documentation for this request. And they need to submit that documentation in order to be approved for a reader. The last thing that happens is a denial. These do not happen very often. I reached out yesterday. In the first 6 months of the MTTC, I was told there were 80 requests made and only 2 denials. Denials typically will happen if candidates are requesting an accommodation that would fundamentally change what we're measuring. And so we could not approve that request. There is an appeals process that I will get to later in the presentation. Any questions so far? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the alternative testing arrangements request form, and technology is working so well. Let's go back to the website. Okay, great. So this shows the form that the candidate needs to submit. And they're told, register for the test, do not schedule the appointment. If you have scheduled an appointment, you need to cancel that appointment. If you go to that appointment, no accommodations that you're requesting would be available for the candidate. And there's a whole lot of just general information that the candidate needs to fill in. Information about which tests they're registered for. You can scroll down a little bit more. Okay, perfect. There's a box here, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in detail later. For individuals for whom English is not their primary language, they just check that box, okay? They check that box, and then they can skip the next two questions because they do not have a disability. And really the accommodation available to English learners is 50% additional time. Okay, so let's say I have dyslexia. I would put in the next question, I have dyslexia. And then in the next box, I might request the arrangements that I want. I'd like to request extra time. I'd also like to request a reader for me for these test questions. And I'd like to request someone to help me record the answers to make sure that I'm answering the questions correctly. So it'd fill all of that out. Then the next section talks about the documentation requirements. And again, the candidates need to read all of these carefully. If it is something where a candidate is just asking to have a medical device in the testing room, a track mouse ball, or an adjustable table, they would just click that first option. Anything beyond that, and there's no documentation needed for those. Anything beyond that, they do need to submit documentations. Typically, the first time a candidate applies for the documentation, they will either check the second bubble or the third. The third bubble indicates that they're going to work with the institution and they're going to ask you to provide us with documentation. And this is for a subset of requests that can be made. And I'll be going over this in a little bit as well. Things like 50% extra time, something like a Braille test form. The institution can provide us with confirmation that you have documentation that supports the use of this accommodation for your candidates. Most of the people who apply for the first time check either the first or the second or third bubble. That last bubble indicates this is for that candidate who took one subtest or one test and was approved for accommodations, and now they're going back to take their next MTTC and they're just requesting the exact same thing. They just check that bubble as well down there. There's a spot for them to upload their files. That's the documentation of the requirements. That's also where they would upload the institution verification form. The rest of that is just statements that they're agreeing, just sort of standard information.
So if
Okay.
students were taking multiple tests on the same day, they could just put in their documentation for the earliest test that they're scheduling. And then just check the box that they've already submitted it for any subsequent test.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe repeat the question for the people
Oh,
online.
sorry. The question that was asked was, if a candidate is applying to take multiple subtests in one day, they would submit the documentation for the first appointment, the first subtest, and then they would just, once that accommodation was approved, they would just submit check that last bubble indicating that they have provided the required documentation. Yes. And that's also one of those things where if you have a candidate who's nervous about all this, wanting to make sure everything gets done right, again, encourage them to reach out and speak to the alternative arrangements coordinator, just to make sure they've dotted all their I's and crossed the T's. I'm going to skip the next few pages because this was in case I couldn't get the documentation to work or the technology to work. Okay, let's talk a little bit about documentation requirements. The documentation requirements differ slightly depending upon the condition. There's a set of requirements for learning or cognitive disabilities, a slightly separate set for all other disabilities or health conditions, and then requirements for English learners. And again, we've gone over this, but they only need to submit with the first request they make. And once that's approved, they just complete the alternative arrangements testing form. The documentation is already there. The only caveat to this would be if they are going to request something different, then they might need to submit additional documentation to support that request. Let's say, for instance, a candidate has a progressive visual impairment, and this is presented itself in adulthood. So maybe when they start testing, they can have screen magnification up to 200%, but then it gets bigger and they need something else. We would need documentation about the change in the candidate's vision that supports that request. Similarly, if they would, then request a reader instead, again, if we take a step back and think about what I said at the very beginning, the goal is to make sure that we are providing accommodations that are appropriate while also making sure that candidates are being assessed as required by ADA. Okay, so I'm going to just briefly go over these. All of this is on the website that I showed you. And if you just click the documentation requirements, you'll see a list with more text, but I've just tried to bring out the highlights here. They need to submit a signed statement by a qualified professional on that person's letterhead. And that statement should include what the recommendation is for the accommodation. This, for learning or cognitive disabilities, the letter also needs to include what the diagnosis is. If it's dyslexia, if it's ADHD, something like what the diagnosis is, as well as the results of the tests that support the diagnosis. There are also currency requirements that I'll be going over in a couple of minutes. For other disabilities or health conditions, you will see there's no requirement for a specific diagnosis. However, they would like to see results of diagnostic tests that support the request, and there are currency requirements there as well. So let's talk about the currency policy. The easiest policy is that the documentation be dated within the past 5 years. If it's more than 5 years old, what we request is that the recommendation is from high school or later for learning or cognitive disabilities. The rationale behind this is that children grow and their learning needs could change as they're growing. So knowing what they got in high school will be, or college would be more appropriate than knowing what their requirement was when they were in elementary school. We've done a lot of work on the documentation policy to try to keep it appropriate and not overly burdensome to the candidates. For the all other disabilities or health conditions, again, dated within the past 5 years, or again, to provide confirmation of a permanent physical condition. A candidate who is deaf is deaf. A candidate who is blind, and that's not going to change. So now we're on to English learners. I've mentioned that English learners are allowed 50% additional time. They do need to submit the alternative testing arrangements request form and check that box as indicated on that form. There are documentation requirements for English learners. They can get a letter from the college or university on the institution's letterhead and signed by an authorized representative. So who's an authorized representative, right? A dean can provide that signature. Chair of a bilingual education program, basically somebody who can verify that yes, English is not this candidate's primary language, and they do need this accommodation for the MTTC test. If you have candidates who are not born in this country, they can certainly submit a copy of their birth certificate, visa, or passport. We do know that sometimes that can be problematic. If there are candidates who are refugees who have come here, there's a whole host of reasons individuals come to this country. But if they do have that documentation, they can provide that. And there's obviously no currency requirement for English learners who are seeking extra time. A caveat for candidates who are deaf. If a candidate submits an audiogram or any kind of documentation that indicates that they are deaf, they are eligible automatically for 50% extra time. However, the test will still be provided in written form. If a candidate wants to request an ASL interpreter for that test form, they are going to need to submit the documentation requirements as indicated in the other health conditions section of the website. Okay, shall we talk a little bit about institutional verification? This applies to the 4 accommodations that are listed on the screen. Candidates getting 50% additional time, candidates getting an ASL interpreter for communication with test center staff, a Braille test format, or screen magnification software that's greater than 200%. And we're gonna take a look at that form. Okay. This is something that the institution is going to need, or the candidate is going to need to work with their program on to get the appropriate information completed. If we can scroll back up to the top of the form for a minute. Okay, this form can be completed by an authorized professional at the Office of Disability Services, or from, I think it's the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation Office in the candidate's state. Those are the 2 authorized professionals to work with the student on this form. There's a section the student will put in information about it. Then there's information that needs to be filled in. Who from the institution is providing authorization, their title, telephone number and email address. That would be if our staff has any questions about the request, they would reach out to you for that. Then you check off the alternative testing arrangements and then the documentation. Basically what you're doing and what your institution is doing is saying, we have documentation that this candidate needs this accommodation. And so we will sign off on that. You know, there's a place for the diagnosis, the name of the person who made that diagnosis, and it does ask for the credentials. The credentials are an important part of that. And then the date of the evaluation. And then there's a place where you need to certify information about the documentation. You're also agreeing that if there was a need, you would be willing to provide that documentation to evaluation systems or the MDE, and then sign off on that. This institutional verification needs to be printed on the institution's official letterhead. If you scroll down to the end, you can see there's a print button. You can save it as a PDF, print it, give it to the candidate. The candidate will upload it with the other materials on the alternative arrangements request form. Okay. And we can skip over those because technology worked. Last thing I want to cover before I open it up for questions is the appeals process. We have not received any appeals to denied requests in more than 2 years for the MTTC program. We do our very best to work with the candidates to resolve their needs, to enable them to test. However, if a candidate is denied a request and they believe they need to appeal that request, there's a process for them to do so. We do need to receive the appeal in writing. We need the candidate's name, address, their ID number, when they're making the appeal. If they could provide any additional documentation that would support the request and give us a summary as to why they believe that request needs to be granted, and the candidate needs to sign that. Any appeals that we received would be shared with the Michigan Department of Education. Ultimately, the MTTC is their testing program. And so we work in partnership with them. If they would make a determination regarding, no, we think you need to approve this request, we would do what they ask us to do. So that's the appeals process. Again, the 2 years that more than 2 years, I've been with the program, we have gotten no requests, no appeals to that process. So that brings me to the end of my formal presentation, but I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have.
Is it possible accommodation to have the paper version of the questions while you're taking it online so that they can like underline, cross stuff out? That kind of stuff?
Okay, so the question was, could you have both a paper copy and an online copy at the same time? Yes, if a candidate believes they need that, they would fill that out in I'm going to see if we can get back to that form.
So follow-up question, would that be one of the ones that you automatically granted, or would that be one where they have to have documentation of the disability together?
They would need documentation of a disability to get that. Yeah. Because that's changing the test for everyone else. The tests, they could request a paper version, but they would still need documentation.
The new grade band one, there was not going to be a paper.
Can we go to that? Thanks. No, if a candidate has a requirement that they need a paper version of the test, we have to provide that. That's ADA. Like we can't we can't argue with ADA. We don't want to argue with ADA. We want to provide tests that enable candidates to be successful. Other questions?
And this may have been in your slide about various accommodations, but comfort animals.
So the question is about comfort animals. I have not gotten that question before. I did not think to talk to the experts about that question. They would fill that out in the, my guess is they should fill that out on the form that they're making that request. If they have documentation that they need that is becoming much more common. My guess is that's going to require a separate room at a testing center, right? But I can't believe that if they have documentation from a professional that says they need this, then yes, that should be granted. That's why we started out with the candidate needs to put everything in that alternative testing arrangements form that they think they need to be successful. And then they can work with our staff to talk that through. And then the staff can help them say, well, no, we need, I'm going to just make some assumptions here. I hope that's okay. We need you to work with your psychologist who believes that that is necessary on their letterhead, provide that documentation, then we would grant the request. Other questions? Bridget?
So if you know that you need to, your candidate knows that they need to test before student teaching starts in September, and it takes like 3 weeks to get once they have all their documentation together, it takes about 3 weeks. And then there's also some time that they should budget for scheduling. So like if September 1st is my goal for when I want to test, how far back would you recommend they apply? And then they also need to consider, there's like stuff that they need to go pull old records from. So how far back would they really need to start planning? And then maybe add an extra month on that if they need to do a retake.
Well, yeah, okay. I'm going to say a test registration for MTTC is good for an entire year, right? So you can make a determination a year before you need to test that you need to do that. That gives you an entire year to gather the documentation, submit it, and still test. I think that, the vast majority of the requests are not going to be things for like Braille versions of tests, right? Something like a Braille version of a test requires even extra time because it has to go out to a Braille house and there's all of that. But so I would say at least 6 months in advance. They have the whole year. So probably the most conservative thing to say is a year before you want to test, start getting it all together, right? Because the other thing I want to remind you of, let's say candidate registers September of this year because they're student teaching September of next year. And they're getting to the point where they are like, I'm not going to be ready to test. I thought I was going to be ready to test in September, but I'm just not confident that I'm going to pass this test. They can withdraw a registration and still get a full refund. In the meantime, they would have submitted their documentation, been approved for the documentation and ready to go so that the next time, okay, I am ready now, they only need the 1 to 3 weeks because they've submitted the documentation, they know what they need, they put it in and they're good to go. So just something to think about. Other questions?
So we have one from online. So Amy writes, I'm really happy to hear that the need for accommodations are being considered. With that, this is a very nuanced and complex application for some segments of students who may need accommodations. It could actually exclude some students from applying, as it's so layered. Can students work with their EEP and together fill these applications out? I work with many neurodiverse and ADHD students. Thus far, they've not needed accommodations. This application would be very challenging for them.
You don't need me to restate that whole thing to you because I certainly can. I think the short answer to that is absolutely. Faculty can work with their students to fill out forms. And she's absolutely right. It is difficult. It's nuanced. The caveats that I'm going to remind people of is that because of FERPA regulations, we cannot, if you would call our customer service and say, X student, we cannot and do not and will not provide you information about that student because they are an adult. But yes, you certainly can sit down at the computer with that student, help them fill out the form. You can help them work with the document uploader. There is nothing preventing you from doing that.
And she has a follow-up. Can the student sign a release?
Can the student sign a release? That would have to go to people above me. To my knowledge, we don't have that in any of our programs, but now I wish I had a pen with me. So, and what would the release be for? Can you ask? Do we happen to know what would the release be for? For FERPA.
Yeah. So in other words, a permission for you, Pearson, to share information if a student has signed a release.
That's something that requires investigation on my part. Other questions? Yep.
This might not be as related, but I know you're probably an expert in this field. As we are rolling out these new tests for the same content area, has there been any discussion of notifying the Educator Preparation Program of which tests people are registering for?
Can you clarify a little bit more?
So with the new elementary grades, for example, we have students in the new program, they sign up for the elementary 103 test. Is there a possibility, just the same way that we get our verification rosters, we get that before the change, we can reach out to them and say, good morning. So
You're taking the wrong test.
instead of afterwards, it's not a student first conversation.
That's a yeah, it is on multiple levels, right? That's another one that I need to go in. That would be an additional deliverable for the program. So how often what are your thoughts about that? How often would you want that?
All the time, yeah.
All the time.
I don't even care if it's a daily email or the moment that they sign up for it, but even if we're like a week, verify that. Just those conversations with someone who has no money that just spent $120.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to take that one back for us to talk with MDE over, talk to you about. Oh, yeah, no worries. It's not fun on our part either when candidates call customer service. And I think there are multiple things we need to think about. I mean, we try to make our websites clear. So we have on the test landing pages what endorsement codes apply for the different tests. But, you know, I get it. Candidates are busy. They're working hard. They see elementary ed, they click that and they don't think, oh, wait, no, it's this new lower elementary or upper elementary ed. So, yeah, we can take that one back. I have to make another note. So this is in addition, because you all get the verification rosters after testing, right? Okay, okay. You want it all.
Enjoy that conversation.
No, but that's a great idea. In my opinion, I don't, as I've said to Bridget and Sean in previous meetings, I know enough to be dangerous sometimes, and what I don't have a clear understanding is all of the steps beyond, like all of that IT support that goes into X, Y, and Z. And so, but I think it's a great idea. So I'll see what we can do, provided MD is agreeable. Other questions? You are. Okay. Other questions? It is now just 2 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen. You're welcome. Again, I want to thank you for being able to be here and present. I am one of those people who prefers doing things in person rather than over Zoom. So although Zoom is necessary, I know we're never getting away from it, but appreciate the time to be here and hope if there are other things and MD is agreeable that would be helpful for us to talk about, we are more than happy to come back. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We didn't do report out. So we will just do the minutes and send that out with the minutes. And yes,
Can I just
Sally.
go on record as saying thank you to Beth? Just be over here.
Definitely. Thank you.
Well, yes, thank you so much to me, which really should go to Laura Martin, who's not here, who's my admin, she's terrible. She's awful. Don't ever hire her if you see her application. We love Laura and Sapna Wade and Sade Wilson and Leah also was very helpful in addition to Brian. They all work together. So I'm just taking the credit, but thank you.
Okay, well, Marcia is your new chair and we will let you know if we get some nominations for chair-elect, and then we'll probably do something electronic to officially elect that person. Marcia, you want to say any parting words?
Just a quick thank you again for all coming to this first personal one in face. And we look forward to a great year. And thank you for all the support, because I'm going to be asking you a lot for support since I'm walking into this room. So I'm thanking you ahead of time for answering all of my emails and my requests and things like that. So thank you very much and look forward to working with you this year.